everybody, and welcome to episode 71 of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi. Hope everyone's doing well. It's a great action-packed weekend. NFL, MLB, college football, NASCAR, all of it going on. And to cover it all, we actually have two episodes of Sports Speak here. One today, one tomorrow. Today, we're going to be joined by Rahill Jaiswal to focus a little bit specifically on the National Football League and the Major League Baseball playoff race with just 2 days left in the Major League season. So without further ado, let's get into our interview and talk baseball, talk football with Rahill Jaiswal. Of course, a lot going on in the Major League Baseball realm with the battles heating up, and we'll get to that in a bit. But let's start with the NFL, specifically NFL Week 3, and maybe a little Week 4, because we already got a taste of it with Thursday Night Football. And of course, one of the big stories, Rahill, that we've seen on the horizon is the struggles for the rookie quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence improved a little bit, had some bright spots in the game against the Bengals, but it was still a loss. 19th straight since that very overly confident Jaguars tweet after we were Week 1 win over the Colts last year. So he's been struggling. Of course, we know Zach Wilson has been a mess so far. Maybe not all his fault. Justin Fields kind of thrown into things with the Bears. Hasn't fared much better. Mac Jones has been decent, but still also threw 3 picks against the New Orleans Saints. Do you think there's a problem with the philosophy in the NFL right now that rookie quarterbacks are expected to just be inserted and automatically play well instead of learning the playbook a little bit and just getting to watch how the NFL game works?
I do, Eddie. I really think that for rookie quarterbacks, it's important for them to sit and learn behind. That's exactly why exactly why Trey Lance is in the best situation possible. He gets to sit for probably a year because the 49ers are still contenders right now. Sit for a year with Jimmy Garoppolo, learn the system, and learn how it works. Whereas I know it was tough for Justin Fields because they weren't anticipating starting him, but look at the game plan they came up with. They basically just threw him into the fire. And with Trevor Lawrence, it's tough because he's no longer at Clemson. Clemson always had the best athletes, the best receivers, the best line. Now he's with the Jaguars. And Urban Meyer has to deal with not having the best team. Normally he's with Ohio State. He's normally number two in recruitment, all that stuff. Now all of a sudden he's got to deal with basically playing Alabama every single week. So it's a struggle. That's why it's so surprising to see rookie quarterbacks come out and play well. You know, I thought Joe Burrow had a really good rookie season. That's why everyone was sort of taken aback by Herbert and Burrow. Because it was so surprising to see how they were able to adjust to the NFL game, because the NFL game's a lot quicker. You know, especially for quarterbacks. Receivers are not normally in college. Receivers are wide open. Here in the NFL, you got to fit the ball into tight windows. So I do think the philosophy is kind of wrong, but at the end of the day, what other option did the Jaguars and Jets have to start Wilson or Trevor Lawrence? They didn't really have any other option. Now, same thing with Fields. Maybe they don't start him this week. I don't know, but the Bears right now with Matt Nagy are a mess. So really any quarterback who's thrown in there is in trouble.
I've never heard the situation where there's 3 quarterbacks and it's a game time decision for who starts, but that's where the Chicago Bears are. And the crazy thing is, this is still a very talented team with the defense, and they have the weapons. This is a team that also got to the playoffs last year and sort of kept pace with the Saints in the Nickelodeon game with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback. So you never know with the Bears. It's always a weird situation with them, but you did mention it. There's a difference, I think, between some of these teams. The Jets and the Jaguars. We were going through this, I think, when Zoe was on a few weeks ago. We couldn't even name who the Jets' backup quarterback was on the roster. We didn't even recognize the names that they had. And of course, the Jaguars traded away Gardner Minshew, so they didn't have really any alternatives either. They were in an expected spot where they just had to play. But I still think with Mac Jones, for example, I don't know. I'm still on the fence with him because the Patriots could have started the year with Cam Newton for a couple games and inserted Mac Jones in. I know it's a completely different playbook when you're playing with a mobile quarterback with Cam versus a pocket passer in Mac, but I think he could have benefited just from watching the game for a little bit. But ironically, after all this, I'd say Mac Jones has been the best of the rookie quarterbacks so far. He's looked the most comfortable. I think a lot of this is due to the fact that he's pretty similar in some ways to Tom Brady. It's Bill Belichick, I think, was a little out of his comfort zone, having a running quarterback who did not have the most accurate arm in Cam Newton last year. which was quite the changeover from 20 years with Tom Brady. Mac Jones kind of embodies a little bit of Brady in the way that he plays, also coming from a college team where he was a little under the radar coming out of college, despite playing for a huge university. It's the same deal as Tom Brady. And I think Mac Jones has sort of lived up to what we expected from him through these first 3 weeks and has played really well compared to these other rookie quarterbacks who have just looked flat out overmatched. But I talked about the Bears a little bit, and I want to touch on this team a little more because it's pretty bad right now. I mean, they lost to Cleveland, was not even close. What was it, like 47 yards of total offense from the passing game? It's 9 sacks. The O-line could not protect Justin Fields. Imagine how many sacks there would have been if it was Andy Dalton back there, who's not a mobile quarterback. It would have easily been in double digits. So for the Bears, how does this team sort of keep pace in an NFC North that has looked pretty good so far this year? I mean, Aaron Rodgers has recovered from the week 1 horrible game. The Vikings had a nice win over Seattle. The Lions have been keeping pace with every team they play, despite some gut-wrenching losses. How do the Bears keep pace in the NFC North with having such an uncertain quarterback situation?
The only way they keep pace, Eddie, is if their defense is pretty much number 1 in all categories. I mean, the Bears defense is probably one of the better ones in the NFL. I don't know about championship level, but with Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks, that defense is great. But as far as them keeping pace, Eddie, I don't see it until they fire Matt Nagy. He needs to go. The game plan they put together for Justin Fields was horrible. They only max protected him about 5 or 6 times. And he's a rookie quarterback going up against Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett with the Bears, who have maybe the worst offensive line in the NFL. I mean, I think most teams, even with guys like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, they'd go half the time at least with max protection because Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett are those good. Or is that good? But you don't do that, and you have a rookie quarterback there. What do you expect to happen? I mean, Fields obviously did not look great. He obviously played poor, but he was really given no chance. Like we said, and he was basically thrown under the bus with his start. Matt Nagy pretty much left him out to dry, and they didn't move the pocket as well. They didn't take advantage of his legs. There was only 2 quarterback designed run plays because for an extremely athletic guy. And this is kind of the same thing we saw with Trubisky. You know, we all labeled Trubisky as a bust, and we all remember that because, you know, he was drafted. They moved up to get him over Watson and Mahomes, and obviously that was a mistake. But Trubisky wasn't a bad quarterback. They went 12-4 the first year. They got to the playoffs, and then obviously the double doink happened. And Matt Nagy won Coach of the Year that year because he basically rode Trubisky's back. But after that, people don't realize Trubisky was actually a relatively athletic quarterback. He could run, he could move his feet. He was pretty quick. But for some reason, Matt Nagy refused to get him outside the pocket and use his legs. He was constantly trying to have Trubisky just stand straight up in the pocket and throw the football, which is not what he was good at. Now, if you got him on the run, maybe it could have been better. Look at the Browns, what they did for Baker Mayfield. Freddie Kitchens was horrible, but he had Baker Mayfield stand straight in the pocket, and he was getting killed. Now all of a sudden Stefanski comes in, he gives him the bootlegs, helps him move the pocket with his younger generation of more athletic quarterbacks. It's fine. So I think the Bears really, if they want to contend, Matt Nagy's window has to be closed at this point. I mean, the only way I can see him keeping his job is if they actually legit get into a playoff spot. They sort of backed into one with an 8-8 record last year, but if they want to contend, they have to fire him. And that's because this is his 4th year now, and he's supposed to be an offensive-minded coach, and the offense has been lackluster ever since he's got there.
They've given him quite the long leash too, because this team has not really excelled that much, and for such a talented defense, allegedly at least, with Khalil Mack at the center of that, you'd expect them to be playing better, and it hasn't come. They've been competitive, but this year might be the worst of all, just with all this uncertainty. But let's shift gears a little bit, because on the other hand, there are some teams that were expected to be playing much better than they currently are, who are sitting at 1-2. 3 that I can specifically label that all made the playoffs last year. Those being the Kansas City Chiefs, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Steelers, of course, Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, he should not be out there anymore. I think everybody's seen the video where he somehow fell throwing the ball by himself in the pocket. Then the Chiefs, I feel like Patrick Mahomes has started to get a little out of control with his throws. We saw it against the Chargers. He can make flashy plays, but there were certain times, especially in that final drive, where he did not need to have to make that crazy home run pass and that crazy off balance falling backwards throw, and it didn't work out. And then the Seahawks, again, bad loss to a Vikings team that had been crushed by game-winning field goals back-to-back weeks, and the Vikings come in so confident with Kirk Cousins and run over the Seahawks. So of those three teams, Raheel, at 1-2, which one concerns you most going forwards?
Probably the Steelers, but I didn't have the Steelers. I wasn't a big believer in the Steelers to start with. I mean, you know what? I don't know if you consider Ben washed up. I just think the situation he's in is horrible. You know, Ben for so long has been able to play well with, with a poor offensive line. But the dude is 39 years old right now. He can't do that anymore. The Steelers' offensive line is terrible. And because of that, they can establish no run game. I mean, they got Najee Harris, but they still didn't improve the offensive line. So you have no run game, and Ben can't push the ball down the field, not only because he doesn't have enough time, but because there's no threat of the run game, so they're just playing back in the passing game. So it's just I don't know. And for the Steelers, their only hope was defense, and now T.J. Watt is injured. Bud Dupree is out, so injuries are getting to the defense, and if they're not healthy on the defensive side of the ball, then they're pretty much you can make the argument, and you probably should, that Big Ben and the Steelers are the worst team in that division. And people would have said the Bengals are the worst team in that division, but the Bengals actually look decent. I mean, they're 3-1 right now, yeah, barely beat the Jaguars, but they look decent. And as far as Kansas City goes, I'm more concerned with their defense, Eddie. I mean, I love Steve Spagnuolo, but this run defense is absolutely horrid. I mean, the Ravens rushed for over 250 yards against them. And maybe you could say that's just the Ravens because of their system. But then the Chargers the Chargers tore them up as well on that side of the ball. Even in the first half of the Cleveland game, you can really make the argument the Chiefs should be 0-3 right now because they could have easily and probably should have lost that game to the Browns. But I'm not too concerned. Patrick Mahomes, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the thing you're going to have to live with. I mean, he's got that sort of gunslinger attitude. I mean, one of the picks where he threw the no-look pass wasn't even his fault because it was actually a good throw. It just the receiver, for some reason, just didn't catch it. So, I mean, they signed Josh Gordon now, so we'll see if that helps. But
Josh Gordon's could be an interesting ad for this team to see
if he can stay in the league is the question. But I'd say I'm most concerned with the Steelers right now. Seattle is always a little up and down. I mean, also Minnesota is really inconsistent. It was their home opener, so they came out and made a comeback, but yet they lose to the Bengals at the buzzer. So you never really know what you're going to get with Minnesota. But I'd say I'm most concerned with the Steelers right now because I just don't see a way they can fix it because they just don't have the pieces to fix what's going on here.
So one of those teams that beat the Steelers are the Las Vegas Raiders. And there's three other teams now I want to talk about who are 3-0 that we did not see being at 3-0. And that's the Raiders, the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers. Now, with the Raiders, I'm really impressed with this team, Raheel. I mean, Derek Carr is looking the best he's looked in a few years. Their defense has been surprisingly stable. I know they let the Dolphins creep back into that game at the end with Jacoby Brissett, but they still got the win in overtime. And they do have two impressive wins, one on the road in Pittsburgh, the other one at home against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And they're gearing up for a huge matchup against Justin Herbert and the Los Angeles Chargers. So the Raiders I'm impressed with. I think they're playing really well. Darren Waller, despite being covered a little better than that week one game where the Ravens let him get targeted 19 times, I like the way the Raiders are playing. With Denver, I can't gauge anything yet. I really can't. They play Baltimore this week, so that's really going to be a gauge of how good this team is. I mean, they've beaten the Giants, the Jets, and the Jags. That is one of the easiest 3-game schedules to start a season really you've ever seen. So that's part of the reason they're 3-0. The Panthers, though, are sneaky because Sam Darnold, suddenly in a new system with Matt Rule and a Joe Brady offense, like he looks really solid out there. He's got weapons. He's accurate. He's not throwing interceptions. He's not holding onto the ball too long. He's rarely being sacked. And this is a Panthers team that doesn't have an incredible offensive line. Sam Darnold's just making use of his targets. Now, not having Christian McCaffrey all of a sudden is going to throw a wrench into things just like they did last year because he's such a dynamic player in the rushing game and the receiving game. But I think he's an interesting player to watch in Sam Darnold throughout this season. And the Panthers are 3-0. They've played some difficult teams. The New Orleans Saints, of course, have been a good team so far this season, and they defeated them pretty handily. I know they played the Jets. And then Houston, I mean, the Texans haven't been awful this year. They kept pace with the Browns. For the situation that they have and having Davis Mills now as their quarterback, I think they've exceeded expectations a little bit, but Panthers certainly have. So, of these 3-0 teams, which one do you think maybe is the biggest faker, and which one do you think is the best chance to sustain this throughout the season?
The faker, I'd say, would be Denver, just because of their schedule. And also, Bradley Chubb is going to be out still. I mean, start the season, he was 6 to 8 weeks. So that's going to really come back to hurt them when they play some teams like the Ravens. But as far as, the real legit team, it's really hard to tell because the Raiders do this all the time. Last year, they started 6-2. They got absolutely bull rushed then by the Falcons and completely collapsed late in the season. If you remember, there was that game against Miami where it was literally they had the Dolphins on that, what was it, that special like Tuesday night game or something, and then someone grabbed Fitzpatrick's face mask and he threw it no look style and the Raiders let the receiver get behind the defense. So I don't know if I can call them legit because, well, I mean, I don't know if the Raiders can sustain this level. I want to see how they play against teams that are, towards the bottom end, because it's easy to bring your A game when you're not the favorite. They weren't the favorites to beat Pittsburgh. They weren't the favorites to beat Baltimore. I think they were the favorites to probably were they the favorites to beat the Dolphins? Or I
think they were. I'm not.
They must have just been the favorites, but
yeah.
Jacoby Brissett is still a good quarterback, and they did let him back into it. So I'm going to be interested to see if they can sustain this level. And the Panthers, without Christian McCaffrey, I don't know if I can get on them, because as soon as Christian McCaffrey left that Thursday night game, the offense did seem to struggle. Because McCaffrey, pretty much the whole offense basically runs through McCaffrey. But I guess I'd say right now I'm mostly bought into the Panthers just because what I've seen in the past couple seasons from Gruden's Raiders, I don't think they can sustain it. Because if you remember last year, they went to Kansas City, they pulled off the upset, and then they played them tough again on Sunday night, but then they completely collapsed late in the season. They had some really bad losses. I think they lost to the Falcons and maybe the Jets at one point. So I'd say right now, probably the Panthers. Panthers this week is going to be a real tell because they have the Cowboys, who, we can make fun of the Cowboys all they want, but they have an absolute juggernaut of an offense. So it's going to be interesting to see how the defense handles that.
Yeah, so you mentioned the Cowboys. One last thing in the NFL side of things, of course, I got to get a perspective from a Giants fan on this 0-3 start, back-to-back losses on game-winning field goals. I don't think the Giants are necessarily a really bad team. They could just as easily be sitting there at 2-1 right now. Daniel Jones has made some strides. Saquon Barkley, at least in spurts, looked the healthiest he's been since coming back from the ACL tear in the Week 3 game. Of course, had that big leaping touchdown over the pile to give them the lead over the Falcons in the fourth quarter. It's just this team just can't hold themselves together late in games. I mean, of course, and just massive drops. First, we saw from Darius Slayton in the game against Washington, then that easy interception that was dropped in the end zone that would have been, the icebreaker of the game against Matt Ryan. And the Giants are letting themselves be beaten by quarterbacks that are not juggernauts whatsoever. Teddy Bridgewater, Taylor Heineke, and Matt Ryan. And it's going to get tougher. They've got 2 games against Dak Prescott. Some matchups with the AFC West. There's going to be difficult. They got to play Herbert, Derek Carr, Patrick Mahomes. You've got to capitalize in the games where you're playing against weaker offenses, because the Giants' offense they're not going to put up 30 points on a regular basis. They play low-scoring games. That's what we always see. But the defense has to be expected to carry some of the weight and pressure these quarterbacks and not give them easy dropbacks. And now it's only going to get harder with Blake Martinez gone. So it's not a good situation for the Giants. But how do you assess this team right now at 0-3 heading into, I'd say, a more difficult portion of the schedule going forwards?
Yeah, it's really disappointing because they should be, let's be honest, they should be 2-1 right now. I mean, the game against Denver, it's always week 1, so I guess you kind of give a pass, but Washington, and they should have easily beaten Washington if Darius Slayton doesn't drop the ball. And even if he does drop the ball, I don't know why Dexter Lawrence jumps off sides. Now, whether that was an offsides or not, I have no idea, but it was so weird because normally when people jump off sides for a field goal, it's from the outside when you're trying to block it. You rarely see it from the interior. So I don't know what happened there. And then the Adoree Jackson dropped interceptions. It's just classic. It's just classic Giants. I mean, I've always said you should put cornerbacks through somewhat of a wide receiver training so they don't drop passes like that, because cornerbacks do drop a lot of interceptions. And Eddie, pretty much, I had the Giants going at least 9-8 or something like that to at least contend for the division, because I thought they'd start the season off 3-0. Their only chance at having any sort of positive season is starting off 3-0, because this week they have the Saints, and the Saints are back in New Orleans for the first time this season. So you know how crazy that place is going to get. So that's probably not going to be a win. Then they got to go to Dallas, and we could say all they want, but the Cowboys have looked surprisingly good, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think anyone expected them to be this good on defense. That's probably not going to be a win. Okay. Then after the Cowboys, you get the Rams, who are probably maybe the best team in the NFL. That's not a win. Then you get the Panthers with their defense. I have no clue. That's a toss up there. Oh, and then to keep who made the Giants schedule? Okay. Please, someone tell me why are the Giants on week 8 playing they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Then 3 weeks later, they get the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. Who made their schedule, Eddie? That's just not fair. Then you get the Rams squeaked in between there, and then the Raiders, who are playing unbelievable football. Oh my goodness. I don't know where I could honestly see we get to week 13, maybe the Giants haven't won a game just because of their schedule. And then after that, they get Miami, so who's pretty good. Then they get the Chargers. I mean, this schedule is absolutely loaded. Now, the only sort of positive I could lean on is the Giants do tend to play better once their competition gets higher. They gave the Buccaneers, they gave the Rams last year a pretty tough test. I mean, they held them to 17 points, but they only scored 9. They pulled off the upset against Seattle. That was a surprise. They almost beat the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football, but I don't know, man. Just with this, and it's not that I don't, I expected a lot more from this team, but let's be honest, people are going to blame Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has not done really anything wrong in these first 3 weeks of the season. He hasn't thrown an interception. He's turned the ball over, I think, once, and that was week 1 against Denver. And that was just weird because the Giants offense couldn't get off the field on third down. So Jones never really had a chance to get into a rhythm. But week 2, he probably played the best game he has as a Giant. And week 3, he didn't play great, but he put them in a position to win. And for some reason, they couldn't close it. So I don't know. Joe Judge, you got to figure it out. I love Joe Judge as a coach, but he's got to figure it out. The penalties that the Giants have, they'll get a 15-yard gain, then all of a sudden there's a holding call, and a 1st and 20 with this Giants offense it just puts you behind. So I with their schedule coming up, we'll see. Maybe they can squeak out a couple wins, but as far as them contending, I think it's pretty much safe. Any sort of hope at maybe backing into a division crown is over at this point, because they probably have one of the tougher schedules in the NFL right now.
The NFC East just overall did not luck out, which is weird because they were the worst division last year. The Eagles, I've been looking, they play the Chiefs this weekend. They've got the Bucks on Thursday Night Football 2 weeks after that. It's brutal. It's really brutal for some of these teams because they get paired up with having to play Tampa, plus having to go through the AFC West, where 3 of the 4 teams I'd say are really good in the West. It's just tough luck. And right now, it's going to be another down year for the NFC East, but I still think right now Dallas just is worlds better than the other 3 teams. They proved it against the Eagles on Monday night. The Giants can't win a game, and Washington's defense, which was supposedly so good, is giving up 40 points a game. So, it's not going well for any of these teams right now. I think Dallas is really going to run away with this, but still a lot to talk about. We're 3 weeks into the season, still a long way to go. But let's transition a little bit into Major League Baseball because playoffs are coming up in just a few days. The picture is just about set. We're recording this on Saturday morning. We've got 2 days left in the season. The big questions remain. We'll start with the smaller question. It's the NL West, because the Dodgers and Giants, the Dodgers are very likely going to win 105 games and have to play a 1-game playoff against a team that had a 17-game winning streak in September. It really makes you wonder, if down the line, Major League Baseball should just do it like the NBA or the NHL and rank the teams based on record, because it is not fair, really, to me, that the Atlanta Braves are easily firmly in the NLDS despite having a bad year and just being a few games over 500. Yet the Dodgers could be 50 games over 500 and have to play a one-game playoff against a team that's won 17 games in a row. I mean, it's amazing. But Rahill, I've got to circle back on the San Francisco Giants, because right after the All-Star break, we had a show, me, you, Zoe, and Tim, and we were talking about the second half of the Major League Baseball season. And all four of us were in consensus that the San Francisco Giants were going to be the team that we're not going to keep up with us through the second half, and they were going to come back to the pack. But they haven't. Yes, the Chris Bryant addition has been nice. Yes, they've gotten some players back from injury. But when you look at this roster and see the age specifically on this roster, this is not a team you'd expect to be 52 games over 500, yet they are. So what is this team doing right? And are they serious World Series contenders?
I mean, they got the best record in baseball. I mean, I think if they win, they clinch tonight, right? Because
yes.
I mean, we all said that the Giants were probably going to make the playoffs, but we didn't think they would hold off the Dodgers, because the Dodgers by far have the most talent in the MLB. And you're looking through this roster and you're like, how the hell are they doing this? I mean, Buster Posey is all of a sudden turned back the clock. So as Brandon Crawford, Chris Bryant has been a great addition. I thought that was a great pickup at the trade deadline. But also, they have the best ERA of a bullpen in the entire MLB. It goes, I don't remember the exact order, but they're number one. I know the Yankees are number 4, and I know the Rays are number 3. So that just tells you the quality of their bullpen. I mean, you look at the game last night, they shut out the Padres. I know the Padres have been maybe the biggest disappointment this year, but I don't know how they're doing this, Eddie. And at some point, I don't know if they can beat the Dodgers in a 5-game series, but I mean, Trevor Bauer is not going to be there. They've played them well during the season series. We all know that the Dodgers sometimes do tend to choke away games. They choked away the one against the Nationals. So you have to at least think that they are World Series contenders. I mean, anytime a team wins over 100 games, you can't call them a fraud. I don't know how they're doing this, Eddie, but I'm going to be completely honest. I would love to see the Giants. If the Giants win the World Series, what a story that would be, huh? Everyone was talking about the Dodgers and the Padres in that division. The Giants come from out of nowhere. No one says they can sustain the level. They do it, and then let's say they beat the Dodgers in the 5-game series. Then they beat a team like the Brewers, who has been flying under the radar because of how good those two other teams are going. Let's say they go to the World Series and beat a team like, I don't know, like the Astros. That would be something unbelievable.
Yeah, it really would. And it's a testament to Gabe Kapler, who is criticized heavily as manager of the Phillies. I mean, pinch hitting for pitchers in the 4th inning, having the team all eat kale and tofu. But you know what? He's gone to San Francisco. He's found a place there, and he fits well with these players. And this Giants team is thriving. But talk about the Dodgers a little bit, because their roster is just insane. You bring in Max Scherzer, who, by the way, statistically has been maybe the best trade deadline acquisition we've ever seen in the major leagues, right there with CC Sabathia when he went to the Brewers. I mean, this is insane what Max Scherzer has been able to do. Every start, he's going 7+ innings. He's keeping the opponents off the board. And this is a player who supposedly at first had the Dodgers on his no-trade list. He did not want to go to a big city, yet they were able to convince him. He goes there, and he's playing incredibly well. And for a Dodgers team now that just got news that Clayton Kershaw may not be available for the postseason due to an elbow injury, that you need Max Scherzer to play well. And you know Walker Buehler's going to be a great pitcher in the postseason as well, and we know how touted that offense is. But if the Giants do clinch, which I think is very likely here in these next 2 days, if the Dodgers have to go into a 1-game playoff against the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals will be rolling out 40-year-old Adam Wainwright, Uncle Charlie, who just got a 1-year extension from the team, by the way. He's going to be starting the wild card game for them. He's been pitching really well this year, kind of turning back the clock a little bit. And this Cardinals team, of course, don't forget about their offense. Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, the youngsters, Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson. My favorite name in the major leagues right now, Lars Nootbaar as well. I mean, they've got a roster and they've been playing incredibly above expectations. They had a 2% chance to make the playoffs on September 1st. Everybody said it was between the Reds and the Padres for that second wild card. And then the Cardinals just stormed up the standings out of nowhere. So if the Dodgers have to go to a one-game playoff, and you mentioned it, this team has choked before in the playoffs, do you think there's any chance that this could be a one and done for the Los Angeles Dodgers?
Well, anytime you go into a one-game playoff, there's always a chance to go one and done because you could there's so many different scenarios. Let's say all of a sudden Max Scherzer doesn't have his best game. Let's say Adam Wainwright pitches the game of his life, and all of a sudden you're left looking for answers. But that's what makes the wild card game so interesting. And Eddie, I know you talk about ranking the teams and how it's not fair, but you can also make the counter argument that it gives these teams who are red hot right now and streaking towards the playoffs, it gives them a chance against an 100+ win team like the Dodgers. Because, like, let's say they played a 3-game series, I think everyone would at least say, oh, okay, the Dodgers probably pull through there. But in a 1-game series, anything can happen. I mean, we've seen teams. I mean, look at the Nationals. They were down and out against the Brewers in that wild card game. They get Juan Soto hits a fly ball, goes past the outfielder, and then all of a sudden they get red hot and they win the World Series. So I think you have to give the Cardinals a chance, especially considering they won 17 straight games. I mean, we've seen the win streaks. The A's went on a 13-game win streak. The Yankees went on a 13-game win streak. 17 games is unbelievable. And I'm pretty sure it's been 20 of their last 21 or something crazy like that. So you see this a lot in any sort of playoffs. If you get hot at the right time, you could be dangerous. So the Dodgers, I know the Dodgers are there's definitely a capability of an upset here. I don't think it'll happen just because I think Max Scherzer is crazy and he's a big, we all know how good he is. I mean, really, if the Dodgers could really choose if they wanted to roll out Walker Buehler, Julio Urias, or Max Scherzer out, I mean, they can choose any of those 3 pitchers. They'll probably go Max Scherzer, but we'll see. I'm ready for it. I'm really ready. I'm really excited to see how this pans out because if the Cardinals, like I said, if the Cardinals make some noise in the postseason, there's so many potential unbelievable storylines in this MLB season. Even I hate the Rays. I hate them. I hate them with a burning passion. But let's be honest, no one thought that they'd be close to winning 100+ games. We all thought the 60-game season, okay, they start off hot, but eventually the other teams in the division would catch them. Even the Red Sox. No one expected the Red Sox to be good. Hopefully not. But what happens if they make some noise? Even Houston. What if Houston somehow wins the World Series and all of a sudden gets a laughingstock back at baseball and proving it wasn't just the sign slings? There's so many potential unbelievable stories that can happen in this MLB postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Tampa Bay's crazy too. They traded away their starting shortstop from the World Series, and they still performed just as well. And then they acquire Nelson Cruz at the deadline, and they still go through the situation where they barely have a 5-man rotation. You've got these openers, constant transition. It's really strange how the Rays just keep doing this with a lot of honestly no-name players, people you don't know or who struggled with teams in the past and kind of catch on with Tampa Bay. But let's focus now, last thing with you, the American League wildcard race, which is kind of wild right now because you've got the Yankees seeming like they might be firmly in it, but then, of course, they lose to Tampa Bay last night. And then you've got tomorrow, if it's still, a contest tomorrow where they need to win and get in. Garrett Cole didn't seem like himself after the last start, but they'd probably need him to rush back for that Sunday game. Then you've got Toronto. Robbie Ray got lit up by the Yankees. They're trying to stay in this. The Red Sox have looked quite vulnerable, lost 2 of 3 to the Orioles, who have now been doing an all-time trolling across their social media, changing their profile picture to Robert Andino, who sent the Red Sox home 10 years ago. And then, of course, the Seattle Mariners, who have just been very quietly staying in the wild card race the entire season, won a bunch of clutch games against the Oakland Athletics, and have maintained a chance here. Didn't play well last night, but are still mathematically in this. How do you see this shaking out? And then most importantly, really, not just with the 2 teams that make it, which one of these teams can actually move on and contend with the Tampa Bay Rays in a playoff series?
Eddie, I'm going to be completely honest. I have no freaking clue with how this season has gone. I mean, so right now the Yankees are first. They got the 1-game lead over Boston, but then Toronto and both Seattle are 1 game back of Boston for the. I mean, believe it or not, there is some crazy potential here that we have a 4-way tie. I don't think that's ever happened. So, to be completely honest, I have no freaking clue what is going to happen because I would love to say the Yankees can clinch tonight. I mean, this afternoon and get in, but we just have no idea with how streaky their offense could be. Last night was a prime example. They were dead silent for 8 innings. The 9th inning, they put something together, but it just wasn't enough time. Boston as well. Boston has the capability of really being streaky with their offense, because people don't realize Boston's got a very dangerous lineup of a lot of good hitters with 2 strikes. But who the hell knows? Maybe the Nationals, maybe Juan Soto, who probably is in the MVP discussion. I don't know if he'll win the MVP because of how bad the Nationals are, but he's been absolutely crushing the ball. If let's say he does something, the Mariners got to go through Ohtani. So, and Toronto, maybe Guerrero hit something. Also, I mean, the home run race is still there. Perez has a 2 home run lead over Guerrero and 3 over Ohtani with two to go. So there's just so many different things. So I have no clue. I mean, if the Yankees get to a wild card game, I'm confident that they can win. They can win a wild card game. Now, a 5-game series against Tampa, that's a different discussion. I don't know about any of these teams with a 5-game series against Tampa Bay because Tampa's always got the trop and that home field advantage and, with their strange things. I mean, I don't know how they got better after getting rid of Blake. I mean, after they got rid of Blake Snell, you were thinking, okay, this is a down year, but somehow they're still hanging in. I have no idea. But the danger with that bullpen game, Eddie, is, you hop from bullpen to bullpen guy. If one guy has an off day, I mean, it almost got him yesterday because Andrew Kittredge did not look great, but that also brings up the idea that so many different guys can close for the Rays. I think they've had 14 different guys at least have 1 save, which is crazy. So I have no clue. It's gonna be a nervous couple days. I'm hoping they can clinch, then I can watch Alabama and Ole Miss in peace. But we'll see. I have no clue with how this season has gone. You really can't tell.
Really unpredictable. And it's so crazy with baseball, too, how the season is so long, 162 games. And so many times it just boils down to that final day. Remember 2 years ago when we had multiple game 163s in the NL West and the NL Central. Now, this time coming into this week, you had 5 teams still vying for a wild card spot in the American League. Still 4 mathematically alive here with 2 days left in the season. One of the great things about baseball. But Rahill Jaiswal, thanks again for joining us here on Sports Speak. We'll have you on again in a couple of weeks for our NBA season preview.
Anytime, guys.
Well, thank you to Rahill Jaiswal, as always, from the Nothing But Sports podcast for joining us today on Sports Speak, and we hope all of you have enjoyed. So a reminder that tomorrow, Tim and I will be posting our weekly pick'em for week 4 of the NFL season. We're currently tied a deadlock 5-4. Not doing as good as we did last year. Only had 10 losses all of last season, already 4. I got to pick things up a little bit here for week 4, but you can follow along on our Twitter at SportsSpeak Live. We'll have more Sports Speak tomorrow, focusing in on NASCAR at Talladega, as well as Major League Wiffle Ball. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But until next time, this is Eddie Kalegi signing off here on Sports Speak. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend.